a short-term focus here, in that this could and hopefully will be the only time that we'll go through something like this. And as a result, I think rugby's really going to struggle because of the close proximity that, you have with players and the nature of the game. So therefore, I think the schools are trying to think outside the box in terms of, if rugby season doesn't go ahead as planned, that, we want to try and make sure that there's some form of competitive sport in replace of that. So I think there's that side of things. But I think alternative to that, strip away what's happening at the moment, and there is still massive scope for, I think, in September, for there still to be cricket being played in club circles and school circles. And if you imagine how short our season sometimes feels, especially with the weather interruptions, it seems to make sense. And I don't know, I look at some of the club structures, especially locally around here, and my son's just started to play in the club system, and I was gobsmacked that they finished playing in July. And I know they do that to make sure that people sort of cram in their club time, and then they can go on holidays and that sort of thing. But I also thought, there's so many different things that you can do with the game of cricket now, and there's so many variations that, you don't need to stick to a traditional 11-a-side game. There's all sorts of things that are happening for the good, and the ECB have come up with some good stuff as well. That I think,
I just sort of, on that note there, Phil, I love being a cricket badger myself, and a self-confessed one. And I know Ben is as well, very much so, probably more than myself. The things I've picked up at the moment, especially from club cricketers, is that there's this desperation to get out there. We've got to play, and, almost an unhealthy obsession, I think, from some about the need to be netting. We have to be netting. And I've picked up a few comments this week, and a couple of guys have sort of fired back at us on Twitter when I've pointed out that it's perhaps not as straightforward as you think when it comes to things like handling the ball, etc. And the response I got was, well, every problem has a solution. Well, yes, it does. We could get to the moon if we wanted to. The point is I don't understand. I understand we're all cricket, don't get me wrong, but the desperation that some of these guys are showing, I think there has to be acceptance at rec level that it isn't professional level. There's not the funding and resources there, is there, to manage the games like the pros might do. I don't know how you see that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's definitely a sense where.
Can you quickly watch one poem?
Yeah, go for it. I think there's definitely a sense where I think we're all kind of just trying to think what the model's going to look like when cricket does return. Okay, just shut the door. Shut the door.
There's a bird in the house.
Sorry, guys, kicking off.
Please do what you want, so you're quiet.
Well, Bill,
exactly.
This is real life stuff, because the next thing is how you remove a bird from your living room. So that's the next topic on our conversation today. This is the reason the guys tuning in, mate, weekly, is that they never know what's likely to come. So
hold that thought, mate. I'm going to go and sort it out quickly, and you guys chat about that. I'll come back to that. It's a really interesting point. Wait there.
I'll jump in on that, Tom, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please do.
I think I pointed this out last week. I think my feeling on it is very similar. That you either the risk is so low,
and there's a swallow in the living room. That is phenomenal. Sorry to interrupt.
Either the risk is so low that you can play cricket and play sport, or the risk is of a level where, hypothetically, if you pass the ball between you might contract it because he might have it or he might have it. If that's the case, then don't try and get around it. Just the answer is you don't play.
Yeah, and I think that I think it's a very naive attitude from certain people I'm hearing at clubs that are willing to put the club's liability, the club's insurance, the health of others.
I don't necessarily think it's the clubs that are putting those things.
No, I'm not saying the clubs. I'm not saying that, Ben. I'm saying that I think it's a naive attitude from individuals to just make their own executive decisions and just go ahead, well, I'm going to practice, I'm going to do this and that, without always necessarily seeing the wider implications that may come back on them should an unfortunate incident happen within a net until this 1st of July date. I don't understand. It's going to be
the date given by the ECB. I mean, the date given by the ECB doesn't actually bear any relevance at all. It's what we need to do is follow the government advice.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it. The ECB don't need to get involved. I'm amazed they bothered. Same with all the sporting governing bodies. It's not down to that. It's not their decision.
No, but I think
you can't govern activity in a sport. The ECB saying no cricket. What does that mean? That someone can't play one-on-one bouts in their garden with their brother?
No, it's no competitive cricket, Ben. I think that's not
right. So having a net then, possibly with a family member, when the restrictions are relaxed, that's probably not an issue.
You've just said when the restrictions are relaxed, though. I think that's
agreed. Yeah, agreed. Going down and having a net with 3 blokes not from my house today is not a good idea.
No, but also having the net at a club that may not have got themselves insured for this season.
I think if you're trespassing, then
I think.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get you. We're going down potentially
we don't need to go down legal and political.
We're going down a long avenue here that we might just want to draw back to where we're going today. So let's come back to today. Hopefully Phil's caught.
Phil's just sent a message saying we're okay, all good. The bird has left the building.
Perfect. The bird has.
Michael O'Connor said. Totally agree, Ben. Follow government advice. Anything else is speculation. I think that sums it up pretty well.
Perfect, and I think that's great. And I guess my concern there was, I guess I'm looking at it from a cricket club hat, Ben. I guess was that, being concerned for cricket clubs that potentially could be put in jeopardy. That's my only.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I have no concern for individuals.
Kibworth Cricket Club set quite a good example on that, actually. So they sent a message out. So they noticed people have been using the nets, and I think if you set out a clear stance, then it's fine. And you say, don't use our nets. We don't want you using the nets. They're out of bounds. And then anyone who does go down isn't welcome, and it's not really their problem.
Spot on. I think we're all saying the same things here, aren't we? With just with ultimately the concerns of the cricket clubs at heart. That's my concern. Phil, good to have you back. Has the swallow been caught? Can we have an update on the swallow?
Yeah, it's all good. It's it's gone. So
we particularly enjoyed the comment, "The bird has left the building." We're hoping you mean the swallow, but we can. That may cause further speculation. We're unsure. Anyway,
my wife's gone riding, so she has as well.
We weren't suggesting anything like that. Phil, so back to our questions. We're looking at. We've just speculated a bit about the impacts, etc. But to be honest, I want to get away from the COVID, I think, a little bit now for guys that are tuning in. So, cricket news this week, gents. Obviously, that huge announcement about the deferral of the 100. I think that it's an obvious decision. I think it was always going to happen. I understand that players have been given a £10,000 retainer to a lot of earnings, I guess, if that's what you want to say. And also, I'm presuming that is, if you're accepting of that, that's the proviso that you agree to play in the comp next year for the team that you'd signed for. So I think that was an obvious decision. I don't think there's anything to be said. But on the back of that, the money that's lost for this, going to be lost on the back of this for this season in revenue, because whilst they're delaying it for a year, they're only postponing it. They're still losing out on a year of earnings from that. And obviously, a lot of the ECB projections, etc., will have been based on that. I think they've come out and said this week, the ECB, that worst case scenario is 380 million deficit from the coronavirus. That was in the press this week, and obviously I think it's important to point out pre the 100, ECB had 73 million in reserves. Now I believe they've got about 8 and 9 million in reserves. So either way, it's impossible to ping it on the 100, isn't it? That's the reason for the huge deficit with the corona, because ultimately it wouldn't have made any difference anyway. It would still have impacted the ECB massively. I don't know what your views on that are, gents. Phil?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the 100 has received mixed reviews, hasn't it? And you know, likewise, I can see some massive benefits, and you know, the biggest downside is, again, you know, it just kind of overgoes the sort of the county process slightly. But at the same time, I'm a big and firm believer in, you know, not sort of making judgments until you see how things actually happen. And I think that's the only shame, is the fact that it's gone and that we're not going to be able to see the impact financially, but also just in terms of, you know, what it brings to cricket in the country, is a shame. And I know a lot of the players were looking forward to playing in it and challenging themselves in a different environment and a different context. So I think it is a shame. It's all speculation at the moment, isn't it? But, you know, like you said, those figures, you know, highlight how we're in desperate need of, you know, giving sort of the financial kickstart that the game continues to need, really. And I just, like I said, I just hope that the whole process keeps the counties in mind, you know, because, you know, there's a wonderful county scene that we've got here, which is the envy of many countries, really, in terms of what we do and how many players we can get through, and you know, how many players we can allow to play professional cricket. And it's wonderful. I just don't, just don't want to see that kind of dissipate, really.
I think that's a really good point, because ultimately, with the money lost, and with, Tom and I did a chat with the PCA yesterday, and I think they have 160 members at the end of the season out of contract, and you just think, this is obviously a massive financial hit, and the county system has been struggling especially on a 4-day front for a while, to support itself as 18 counties. And you can't help but think that next season could look very different in terms of the championship, whether that's squad sizes of some of the smaller counties, because if they're expecting to lose players that they maybe can't replace due to financial reasons, can you enter a season with a squad of 14 or 15 rather than 20 or 25? And what impact that will have on their ability to play all 3 formats.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, spot on. The counties have already made a really good transition the last few years, haven't they? Where they've moved away from, exactly as you said, that concept of having 25 playing pros and no opportunities. And actually, just going back to Tom Banton, Tom ended up, he was coming to Kings for sixth form anyway, but he was at Warwickshire at the time, and he wasn't getting any second team chances, not because he wasn't good enough, but because the squad size at Warwickshire was something like 25. So they, of course, because they were paying players, they had to play the professional playing staff into the second team, and Tom just wasn't getting any opportunity. So when, you know, Somerset saw him play, and basically, you know, the conversation already started in terms of opportunities and so on, and Tom was so fed up that he changed counties, and now he's an international player who's, you know, a county superstar because he got those opportunities early. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is that there is a positive in what the counties have done more recently because of those financial constraints, because what it does is it breeds our youngsters earlier, it challenges them, it gets them into second team cricket fundamentally really early, but it also gives opportunity for development thereafter. And that was a good example of why the 100 could potentially work really well, in that, you know, we've got a really talented youngster called Will Smead, who's potentially already this year, in his last year at Kings, going to play quite a bit of potentially one-day stuff for Somerset, because during the 100 phase, a number of players would have come out of that. And, you know, granted that one-day competition wasn't going to look as rosy, but, you know, if you're looking at producing really tip-top players and giving them more opportunity, that's a good example of that. But granted, the knock-on effect financially for the counties there is therefore that the members wouldn't want to maybe attend some of those matches because they know their superstars aren't playing. So there's a lot of counter arguments, isn't there? But you know, I definitely agree with you, Ben, in that, you know, there's a concept there which you know, is allowing a process for development, and you know, whether it's forced or not to the counties financially, it's something that's definitely bringing up some really positive stuff as well. I feel, and I know I'm biased because I generally look at players from about 10 to 19, 20 years old. That's my age bracket in terms of the players that I tend to look after. So I'm of course really keen to see them getting opportunities. But I think for the future of our game and the future standard of our international side, that sort of stuff's really important as well.
There's a wider issue there, I think, Phil. I mean, that's an excellent insight and take on that. And Nick Beggy, who's joined us today, his lad Will's part of the Leicestershire setup and Leicestershire Academy. And I think Will's now 15, 16. And I just think being that age, and you're probably the closest to that age out of all of us, but crumbs, they are key years, aren't they, in your cricket development? If you're a batter, the amount you learned batting time in the middle, senior cricket, and that's been taken away from these guys. And that you can't replace that. And who knows, we may see more guys in coming to the end of their schooling this year and going abroad for a season. So there may be positive, guys who have been pushed towards university in the past that potentially it isn't for them, or it's not an avenue that they're quite sure of. I hope that I've had the experience of playing abroad. I'm not sure if you have, Phil, of being abroad for a season, but crumbs, it did so much good, and I'm hoping that the youngsters can catch up on that missed learning by potentially spending a few more seasons in their younger years abroad and not being necessarily pushed too hard down that university route. And I know I don't expect to comment on that, Phil, because I know that's you're in a real compromising position with guys, but I don't know. We may see a change in that.
Well, I think you raised quite an important point there, Tom.
Nick, thanks for that. Nick has just confirmed it would have been Wilt's first year in the Prem.
Yeah.
I just look back to that year myself as a batter, and thanks for that, Nick. And you cannot replace that experience. You cannot. It's going to be just delayed a year, isn't it? And
yeah, well, I mean, in terms of Will's development, that's, I mean, really, really unfortunate for him, isn't it? Because he's got a really good opportunity there at Oakham, which is a good club and obviously been promoted to the Premier League. And given, from my understanding, their sort of squad size as a club, they would have had the opportunity to let him be in the first team, which for someone of his age is brilliant, because obviously not many other lads of that age do play in the top divisions from my experience over the last couple of years. And it would have been nice to see him have an opportunity to do that and do well, no doubt. But no, my next point was something you raised about universities. You have to correct me if I'm wrong, but are there going to be MCC universities next season?
I don't know if you can chip in on this, Phil, but the information I've read is that this was going to be the last season of MCC-funded university schemes. I've seen a lot of stuff out there on social media, guys that have been through the schemes. Myself and Phil were fortunate to go through them as players, and you did a bit of coaching on the MCCU scheme as well. And I think the general feeling is that's a sad potential end to that scheme, which has brought many cricketers a healthy balance. Yes, the argument will be, how many first-class cricketers produced, how many pros are still playing? That's very well, but these guys, they're not objects, they're cricketers. They've got a life, they've got a living, they've got a life outside of cricket, and when they do drop out of the cricket system, where do they go? And I think that what the university system does provide is that all-round experience, education, and life experience. That the one thing is that when, yes, they might not all make professional cricketers, but at least they don't just drop off the radar and end up with potential lifelong health problems or other issues that surround that. The majority.
For a lot of guys as well, from my experience, it provides them with that opportunity to follow their sort of pursuit in cricket a little bit longer. Because ultimately, if you got to 18, 19, maybe had a gap year and hadn't made it, hadn't broken into a county's first team, then you're thinking, right, well, what have I got to do as a career? I need to go to university. Cricket's not for me. What this does, I feel, is it provides them an opportunity to continue to pursue their cricketing career whilst furthering their education. And it's also that second way into cricket for a lot of people. You know, that there aren't always people at 17, 18 that are the developed cricketer that can go into first class cricket. There are some that need extra experience, a different environment, probably make them more rounded as a person.
I guess the flip side to that, then, sorry to interject there, but the flip side to that is that with the county and the PCA having introduced the new scheme for 18-year-olds coming out of school to be signed, in a way, it can be a double blow for these guys, because if they're not signed at 18 and there's no university scheme, Phil, what do you think on that? Are we saying, where do these guys then go? And I know that's a worry for many coaches involved with 18-year-olds at the moment. What's your take on that?
So, I mean, again, you know, it's a bit fluffy knowing what's going to happen moving forward. But as far as I know, I think the ECB are basically taking control back of what's happening with the universities, and how that's going to look moving forward, we'll see, because it's all going to be financially, orientated, isn't it? And the benefit that the MCCU scheme has had is that they've been backed up by a very affluent, financially secure body, and that's given that security. And I think the fact that the ECB are going to run it again, you know, I hope that they continue to sort of develop exactly the same reasons that you've both discussed, that, you know, a similar model which allows players who leave school the opportunity to go to university at the same time as continuing their cricket development. And we have them all the time. You know, the chap I mentioned earlier, Will Smead, he's got a very good chance of getting signed. Well, you know, we'll see. He's meant to be leaving school, you know, at the end of this summer. And obviously this summer was a bit of a defining summer for him to see whether he's ready or not. And obviously he's going to miss out on that. But moving forward, let's say, he might get a contract of some kind. He is the sort of chap who during the winter will still want to study, will want to get a degree. He knows that there's life beyond cricket, because, you know, most cricketers will play till 37, 38 on average, if they're lucky. And then there's another career after that needs to happen. So it's massive, you know, it's massive for our sort of cricket players who are leaving school. And, I really hope that, whatever happens with the new system, that it continues to support those players, and that, you know, it provides that opportunity, basically.
Perfect. No, I think that's a nice point to sort of conclude that regarding the universities. But yeah, great insight there, Phil and Ben. Thanks a lot. Guys, next thing in the sort of news this week is that if you're looking at club cricket, Eston, we have a lot of guys that follow this in the last couple of weeks that are club cricketers, which is fantastic. Grassroots of the game. Essex League have made a big statement this week, I think. One of the first leagues to announce there's no promotion or relegation in their leagues. Quite a punchy statement, I'd say, because like Ben alluded to earlier, whilst we know what we know, very hard to make maybe them longer term decisions when we could still play half a season. What's your take on that, guys? I think that I'm not sure as a player, from a playing side, what's the motivation there to compete maybe in the top leagues. Are guys just going to be so desperate to get out and play cricket anyway? They're not too bothered. I don't know. What's our take on that?
I think it's an interesting one.
Big shout, isn't it, Ben?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that that's actually a bad statement to make. I mean, if you're aware that you can't predict how much of a season you're going to get, and I think I made the point last week that you're actually as a cricket board, you're better off, as a league board, you're better off not giving a date, because you're probably going to have to change it anyway. So if you give a date, you're shooting yourself in the foot massively. You've got to say something. If you don't know how much of a season you're going to get, probably less than half, can you promote and relegate teams if everyone hasn't played everyone and in the format that you originally wanted? Because I suspect if you have less than half of a season, you can either have 7 games maybe where everyone plays 50 over cricket, win-lose if that's the format of your league. Or you can change the format to T20 and try and get everyone to play everyone once. But then you're changing the framework of the league. Yeah. Can you promote and relegate people with that in mind?
Gareth Owen, who's following us today, cricketer at Banton Cricket Club, he's just said that is that if we have 11-game season, everybody play everyone once and one down. Again, that's an option. We don't know. Phil, before I get your views on that, just for those who've just joined in, we've got Phil Lewis today, who's with us from King's College, Banton. Phil's a highly respected, highly regarded coach, having nurtured guys such as Tom Banton, Josh Buttler, etc., through their cricketing formative years, and we're looking to have him on board with us today. Phil, what's your take on the league situation?
It's an interesting one because there's a lot of mixed opinion in cricket clubs and leagues, isn't there? You know, and it's individual motivations for certain clubs, isn't it? Some clubs will be absolutely delighted that they can just focus on the enjoyment of playing cricket without worrying about relegation or promotion. And because of that, it means that they're in a position where they can just relax for a year and just enjoy their cricket. Whereas there's other clubs who, are desperate for promotion, love to get into a league above and love that concept and will have invested a portion of time recently in order for that to happen, whether it's with, player recruitment or, an improved winter program. And, either way that you look at it, there's going to be winners and losers, aren't there? And I think, whatever call the leagues make and whatever they do to ensure that, the next few months, happen in some kind of positive way. I think everyone's plucking at straws, aren't they? This is the first, isn't it? And as such, there'll be some pretty bold sort of things that are going on, but as a result of which, we're in first case scenario here, really. So yeah.
In a way, I'd like to say fair play to the Essex League for actually coming out, being bold and brave enough to make a statement. Everyone knows where they stand.
Right, yeah.
There's no rubbish involved, no back and forth, no ifs and buts. That's what's happening. Deal with it, guys. Some will like it, some won't. You can all plan for it.
Yeah. I agree, Tom.
And those. Martin Henderson said, "Can't we play friendly games against the teams in our own leagues? No relegation for a season won't hurt."
Again, that's what Phil just said. That would suit some and not others. So that's a bit of an insight into that. Right, moving on. Phil, I want to just we've had a question come in. It came in last week. We didn't get round to it, but knowing that you were going to join us this week, I thought I'd save it. But it's along the lines of private independent schools, like where you work yourself, and what are the schools doing to engage and support state school cricket? I probably have an insight into this and know a few of the answers, but what would you say King's?
Yeah, great question.
It is a great question, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Those are on the outside of it don't always see it or understand it. There's very preconceived ideas about independent private schools, and I think you on here today is going to be refreshing for a few guys to see that. Well, you're just a normal bloke, can't you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the first thing is that although my job is at a private school and I love coaching cricket there and running the sport and so on. It's tough because we all know that there's overwhelming stats relating to the fact that if your son or daughter goes to a private school, that they have a more contact time based cricket program because of the time that they invest in the facilities that they have, and it's absolutely a question that comes up quite regularly. So just to give you an example of what we do at King's and the MCC, it sounds like in the Leicestershire region maybe haven't got this scheme going yet, but we've now, I think it's been running for about 10 years. We've got a scheme where the MCC have basically created hubs where they use our facility at King's and they use some of our coaches and they basically allow that scheme to attract free coaching sessions for any state school kids in the local area to come to King's once per week for the whole of December through till March. basically giving them a free opportunity to access top facilities and top coaching. So it's the, you know, a big tick in the box. It's not perfect, but it's one that allows at least those keener cricketers in the area to come forward and just get free coaching. And it's amazing, really. It's a really difficult one. Sorry, who asked the question? What's his name?
Andrew.
Andrew. Yeah, Andrew, great question. And one that I think continues to progress, because it's all based on finances. And the private schools obviously have systems where the kids who go to those schools pay fees, and as part of that, they all get a program. And some schools, rightly or wrongly, will have an elevated program for scholars and so on. You know, you look at that model and you think, actually, it's a horribly elitist and a horribly sort of counterproductive process for, you know, that talented kid who may never pick up a cricket bat just because they've never had the opportunity, and may end up going into a different sport, or may end up not playing any sport at all. But until those avenues open up even more, you know, it's difficult to know. And you know, thanks to, you know, great companies like Tom's who are getting out there and providing that opportunity, you know, for anyone, regardless of whether you're at a state school or a private school, that needs to happen more. And you know, I just hope that you know, people continue to support companies like yourselves, Tom, because there needs to be more of them. And you know, it's essential really for young cricketers to gain that opportunity to do it. And you know, we've got some really good cricket clubs in the local area, and I know you have up in Leicester as well. And they do a great job, some good coaches, but again, the facilities is the biggest problem. And generally, you know, the whole process of facility usage is one of the biggest sort of barriers to this sort of process developing. But I hope that sort of waffly answer gives a little bit more of an insight, in that there are some schemes, and you know, there are schools, especially like us at King's, where we are constantly trying to help sort of the local state schools. And you know, likewise, we've got a great agreement with Castle School locally to us, where we basically we use one of their football pitches, and they use one of our cricket facility, and they've got a really good girls setup as well. So there's a lot of communication and multi-use that can come into play here as well. So it's not perfect, but it's definitely helping. And yeah, hope that answers that a bit.
No, that's a great insight into that, and I think that's really useful for the guys watching to develop a bit of an understanding on that if they've not got it already. I guess one of the frustrations I've found on the flip side since being out of the independent sector as a coach has been when it comes to hiring facilities as a general member of the public. We find that there are certain public schools, we're not going to name them, but they almost price you out of the market to, you know, and you pay the going rate. I get that, but no doubt when planning consent and plans are put in, you know, it's part of the community, we're going to engage the community in this, we're going to make it affordable, and then you're looking at £55-60 an hour to hire a hall out for a cricket net, and you sort of think, but look, I mean, they're running businesses, and that isn't everywhere, and that's probably on the